What's up, Chiefs fans? Today we're doing a way too early 53-man roster prediction. You're going to want to stick around all the way to the end of the video because, hey, some of the fan favorites from last training camp didn't even make the practice squad this year. Check it out.
Touchdown! Kansas City! One of the greatest duos in the history of the National Football League! Patrick Mahomes to Travis Kelce on a push fade comeback, and the Chiefs have won this incredible divisional playoff game in overtime.
All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get right into this because we got a lot of guys to talk about. And let's start off with the easiest part of the roster to do. Patrick Mahomes, let's not even talk about it. He's making the roster. Chad Henne, I think, has a spot on this roster as long as he wants to play football. I think Andy Reid loves him. As long as he can do any kind of football, then he's going to be on the roster. And running backs, let's get right into those guys. CEH, he's going to make the roster, guys. I know a lot of people don't like him. I know a lot of people are saying bust. Frankly, he was never one of my favorites or a guy that I even thought about the Chiefs taking. When the pick came up that year on draft night, I was banging the table for Jonathan Taylor. Look, I know that's easy to say now. I can't go back and prove to you that that's what I was doing, but I really loved Jonathan Taylor, wanted him on the team. Doesn't matter now. He's a Colt, and he's the best running back in the league. He's not on our roster, but CEH is. He'll make it. Rojo, real quick on CEH. Hey, man, let's just hope that he has a breakout year. We're all pulling for him. I want the dude to do good. And there's no hard feelings. Like, I've come to grow fond of the guy, and I hope he succeeds, man. I want to see him do what I think he is actually capable of doing. I think he's capable of being a very productive back in this league. He's just got to stay healthy. Rojo's going to make the roster. He was one of our free agent acquisitions this offseason. He's, to me, a more straight-ahead runner. But I'm hearing some rumblings about him playing a part in the passing game. We'll see. I've never seen him do that. But I think he will make the roster. Next back is Derek Gore. I think he's a fan favorite. He's definitely one of my favorites. He was my favorite back on the whole roster last year. And I think he will easily make this roster. I hope we get to see him get some more opportunities. I really like his running style. Really like the way he works. Honestly, I think he's better than CEH. But he won't be the starter, unfortunately. And then I did keep a fourth running back on this roster, and I think everybody's going to really like this. He's a 7th-round pick, but everybody's really excited about him, including myself. Isaiah Pacheco, he's not a complete back. He's got some stuff he's got to work on, and I get it. But he's got some tools that you just can't teach, and one of those tools is speed. And I really love that about him. I think he's also going to be one of our returners this year. So Isaiah Pacheco will make the roster, I think, more on special teams than anything else. But hopefully he'll get some opportunities and we'll get to see what kind of true running back ability he has. He does have some vision issues, just to let you guys know. Not as far as like corrective stuff, like he doesn't wear glasses that I know of, but he just doesn't see the whole as well as I would like, but you can get better at that, especially around guys like Derek Gore and Rojo. I think they have pretty good eyes. Mike Burton is going to make this roster, so I have nothing really to talk about with Mike Burton. He brings a lot to special teams. He brings a lot to the team when he's out there on the field for offense. He's a good fullback. He's a really good fullback. I like him. Next on the agenda is wide receivers. We're going to talk about Juju. He's going to make the roster, obviously. I think he'll be the number one guy, although the next guy could be the number one guy. MVS, he's got a lot of tools, man. There's a lot of things to like about MVS. Height, weight, speed guy. And, he could play a really important part to the Chiefs offense this year, so he'll easily make the roster. I think the first four receivers on this are really easy. Hardman's going to make the roster. I think he has a chance to be a breakout dude and be the number one guy. So those first three guys are going to be fighting to see who the number one receiver is. I'm rooting for Hardman, man. I would really like to see him kind of fill those roles that he was drafted for. He was honestly drafted to replace Tyreek, so here's your chance, buddy. And he's not the same dude. He's not Tyreek. He is fast, but he doesn't have the same change of direction. We all know that. But, hey, Hardman's going to make the roster. He's going to have a chance to make himself a lot of money this year. And I hope he goes out and really blows the socks off some people. Sky Moore, everybody's super excited about Sky Moore. I like Sky Moore too. I think the expectations are a little high, so temper your expectations, folks. I think if Sky Moore brings 500 yards and 4 touchdowns, I think that's a really good year for Sky Moore. But he will easily make the roster. Now you get to the 5th and the 6th spot for receivers, where those are the first questions you have. And for me, the 5th one isn't a question. I like this guy. I've liked this guy for years. I was honestly hoping we would draft him, but it turned out, hey, he was an undrafted free agent, and we got a crack to bring him into KC. Justin Ross, he's getting a lot of hype right now. Again, set your expectations, guys. I don't think... I'm seeing people out there say that he could be the number 1 receiver this year. I don't think I don't think he's ready for that just yet. I think he has potential to be that in the future, but not this year. He will make the roster. I'm going to go out on a limb and get a little dangerous and say I'm guaranteeing that dude makes the roster. My 6th wide receiver, I did keep 6, Darius Fountain. Hey, I've seen him make some plays. I think he's got some things to offer, and I think he'll be on the special teams as well. So Darius Fountain's my 6th wide receiver. Tight ends, I'm going to try to get through really quickly because some of these other position groups take a little bit longer to talk about. Travis Kelce, no need to talk about him. We all know that's future Hall of Famer and probably the best tight end to ever breathe. Him and Tony Gonzalez, right there neck and neck. Him and Gronk and Tony are all right up there for best ever. And some of you are probably saying Kittle. Look, Kittle, I like Kittle. Kittle's a great tight end. I think Kittle will be a Hall of Famer. Is he the best tight end ever? No. I don't think his blocking ability puts him over Travis Kelce and all those guys at all. I think he's a great blocker, obviously, but he's not the same pass catcher as those other guys. He's a great pass catcher, but he's not Travis Kelce. He's not Tony Gonzalez. Anyway, that's a whole nother football team, so let's stay on this football team. Travis Kelce, easy, going to make the roster. Noah Gray, going to make this roster, and this time last year there was a lot of hype surrounding Noah Gray, and that's why I'm throwing some caution to you guys about some of these other guys, these first-year guys that I'm hearing a lot of hype about. Noah Gray is still the same player that we got excited about last year. He may have a breakout year, or he may just get incrementally better, and that's okay. Either way, I think he has a chance to be that number 2 tight end, but there is one other guy on the roster that could have something to say about that, and that's Jody Fortson. If he's completely healthy and he shows all his potential, he could be the number 2 tight end. But those are the 3 tight ends that make the roster for me. So excited about that group. The O-line group, I'm going to try to get through these guys as quickly as possible. I decided to keep 9. The Chiefs like to keep between 8 and 10. I don't think they'll keep 10 this year. I went with 9. Orlando Brown, that's an easy one. Not going to talk about him. Jerron Christian, I think, has a chance to make this roster, at least initially. I don't know that he'll stick all year, but he could. Joe Thuney, one of the best guards in football. Not going to talk about him. Austin Wiley has some position versatility and could be the starting right tackle, but he can play guard as well, as we all know. So he's definitely going to make the roster. Creed Humphrey will obviously definitely make the roster. He's the best center in football last year. Super excited about seeing his second year in the pros and what he can bring, because it's scary to think that the dude could be better. Austin Ryder, I think, will make the roster as well. A lot of these guys that we have on the roster have center capability, so Austin Ryder might not make the roster. I wouldn't be that surprised if he didn't make the roster, just because other guys on the roster can also play center, such as Nick Allegretti, and I think he will make the roster again. I think he's a solid backup. I think that's kind of his ceiling. I don't ever think he's going to work his way into being a starter somewhere. If he does, he's going to be a mid-level starter or low-level starter. Trey Smith, again, super excited. Him and Creed Humphrey were my guys last year. They were guys that I was really wanting us to draft. I was super excited, especially when we got Trey Smith so late, because I think it was just an absolute steal. Super excited to see him. And what makes it even more exciting to me is the guy that I think will be lining up beside him this year is Darian Kinnard, one of the draft picks from this year. Again, we spent a 5th-round pick, I believe, on him this year, late-round pick. I think he could have went much higher, and it would have been easily justified. Darian Kinnard is going to be the starting right tackle, and when you think about from center over to right tackle, that's a really exciting part of our offensive line. Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and Darian Kinnard can absolutely road grade, and we should see more effective running out of our running backs because of those 3 guys. And ultimately, the whole offensive line is really just stacked. So this is one of our best units on the whole team. Really excited to see him get out there. Honestly, this offensive line has the potential to be the best offensive line in football. Let's move on to edge. Frank Clark's going to make the team. George Karlaftis is going to make the team. Real quick, I wasn't a huge George Karlaftis guy. I totally get why they took him. But as far as draft picks go, I think this is our guy that's a boom or bust pick. I think he has a higher ceiling than some other guys on YouTube are talking about. I love RGR and all those guys over there. They're down on George Karlaftis. I get it. He's not my type of D-end either, but I've watched a lot more film on him. He's growing on me. I just hope he doesn't end up kind of like CEH did, where I talked myself into being excited about him, and then he does nothing. But George Karlaftis, definitely not one of my dudes, but I'm excited to have him, and I think he brings a lot of great tools to the team. And if he hits his full potential, we'll be set at that position for a while. We just need to get the other side set up to have bookend D-ends. Mike Dana, I think he's just a solid football player. I think he's kind of reached his ceiling, guys. So if you're ever expecting Mike Dana to be like some kind of superstar, I just don't think that'll ever happen. But I think Mike Dana will be a solid backup his whole career. Here's a guy that everybody forgot about, though. Joshua Kando was a 3rd-round pick last year, and nobody talks about him because he didn't see the field a lot last year. He was a guy that needed development. I think it's a very telling thing that we didn't re-sign Ingram and we didn't bring in Clowney. We could have. Unless those guys just didn't want to come to KC, which seems unlikely. Kando, I think, may have progressed quite a bit this last season and during the offseason. And if Veach is seeing stuff and Reed, if they're seeing stuff that we're not seeing, it could be with Joshua Kando, and he could have progressed into a very solid rotational pass rusher. I'm hoping that's the case, but those are my 4 edges for now without seeing camp or anything like that. Interior D-line, we got Chris Jones. That's the easy one. We're not talking about it. Derek Nottie, again, solid dude. I know some guys are up and down on him. I love Derek Nottie. Great run defender. He serves an absolute purpose on this D-line. Don't beat him up too hard. He serves a big purpose here. He's worth the money we pay for him. And I hope Derek Nottie's here for a long time. Treshawn Wharton's going to make the roster. Another guy I really like. We could see him get used in a more utility knife type of way this year. You might see him kick out the edge a little bit more and do some other things on passing downs. So keep an eye out for Treshawn Wharton. Colin Saunders is going to make this roster. He's another guy I really like, and maybe people are down on him because he's never really progressed to be some kind of superstar or stud, but he's definitely good depth for this D-line. And then this is another unit I'm really just excited to talk about and excited to see play, the linebackers. This linebacker crew could make all the difference in the world for our defense, and I think you're going to see a difference in the defensive line because of these guys. First and foremost, Willie Gay. He's going to make the roster, and be ready for him to have a breakout season. Nick Bolton kind of already quietly had his breakout season. I think he should have had a lot more playing time last year, but he had Hitch on the roster. And let's be real, coaches get attached to guys. You go to war with a guy for a while like Hitchens, and you kind of get that senior syndrome where high school coaches will start the senior because they've coached him for 4 years. They know the guy. They love the guy. and maybe they start him over a sophomore that has more talent. That's kind of the situation I think happened last year. I think Nick Bolton should have been the guy playing all year, and towards the end of the year we saw Nick Bolton a lot more, and I think Nick Bolton's going to be a pleasant surprise for those of you that for whatever reason were living under a rock. Nick Bolton could be a superstar someday. Honestly, this linebacker core is loaded, and I really love it. Leo Chanel, we drafted him this year. I'm really excited about him as well. A lot of athleticism. He's mean. He's a thumper. He will go downhill, and I think we're going to defend the run a lot better if we can find a way to stay in our base package a lot more than we normally do. I would love to see all three of those guys on the field at once. Jermaine Carter's a special teams ace. I know he started for the Panthers, and a lot of people were thinking we signed him to be a starter. I don't believe we ever signed him to be a starter. I believe we brought him for depth with starter experience and, more importantly, special teams. Then, here's a surprise for you guys. I got Mike Rose making this roster. He's an undrafted free agent. I think he has a great opportunity to make this roster and be depth. And then a K-State great, Elijah Lee. I think he'll make the roster. He is a guy, though, that I'll talk about a little bit later where he could be on the bubble and you could swap him out for another guy that I'll talk about. Corners. Snead's going to make the roster. Not going to talk about him. Trent McDuffie, he's going to make the roster. I'm ecstatic about that pick. I really like it. I think we got a steal there. Joshua Williams is going to make this roster. And guys, this isn't in any particular order. This isn't like the depth chart for me. It's just, hey, I think these guys are going to make the roster, and I think Josh Williams will definitely make the roster. Next guy is Rashad Fenton. He's a guy I've heard some people talk about maybe not making the roster. I don't think so. I think he'll definitely make the roster. I think he'll be fighting for that third corner position with a couple different guys. And one of those guys is going to be Lonnie Johnson. We sent a 7th-round pick over to the Texans. The Texans were happy to get rid of him, and all their fans were like, hey, see you later. That's because they were playing him out of position at safety. He was not great at safety. He does have some size and athleticism to him, and he'll make the roster, I think, at corner, although the corner position is very competitive, so it wouldn't be a big deal if we released him. The fact that it was a conditional 7th-round pick means that if we release him, probably get our 7th-round pick back, so it was a no-risk move. But I think ultimately he'll make the roster. The last guy I have at the quarterback position making the roster was one that I really had to think about because there's a guy I like better than him, but I'm thinking DeAndre probably will have the edge on him just because he's a veteran, he knows the playbook, and Spags knows him, and I think ultimately he'll make the roster. DeAndre Baker. We'll talk a little bit more about corners a little bit later, but let's move on to safeties. Juan Thornhill is going to make the roster. Deion Bush, another special teams ace. He's on this roster for special teams. He will play some safety for us, but that's not why he's here. Justin Reed, I think everybody knows by now, this is the guy they went out, they got to replace Tyrann Mathieu, and I think the thinking was behind all this is probably that safety is not a position you should be spending tons of money at because it's never really worked out for the Chiefs when we spend a ton of money at safety. Now, obviously, Eric Berry was phenomenal, but when we opened up the checkbook, the dude had, so many problems. I miss Eric Berry, and I love the dude. I'm not talking smack about Eric Berry, but I think just a lot of times when you spend that big money at safety, it doesn't work out, and you see that play true around the league. So I think the Chiefs have kind of learned their lesson there. That's why they didn't re-sign Tyrann Mathieu, and they're going with Justin Reed, which he's a more athletic, faster safety that will play some of the roles that Tyrann Mathieu played. And we'll see. He's never going to be Tyrann Mathieu, I don't think. So don't look at him as a direct replacement. Look at it as kind of more of a money ball move of Justin Reed can give you, hey, if Justin Reed can give you 80% of the leadership and everything that Tyrann Mathieu gives you for the money that we paid him, then you're pretty happy. And I think, honestly, he'll probably give you 90% of what Tyrann Mathieu gave you. So I think that's a good deal. And then Brian Cook, another draft pick, another guy that I like. I think he will play as the season goes on a lot more snaps, and he may play right from the get-go because I know they love those 3 safety sets. So depending on how he does in camp and how he looks in preseason, you may see a lot of Brian Cook. And then really just to round out real quick, I know it's kind of a given, but Harrison Butker is going to make the roster, Tommy Towns is going to make the roster, and James Winchester is going to make the roster. Those guys are a given. So that's it. That's your 53-man roster. I had 25 on offense, 25 on defense. I didn't do that on purpose. It's just kind of how the way it turned out, but I like it. I like that roster. Now we're going to talk about the practice squad, and there's a few guys here that could make the roster, and if I'm wrong, it's going to be these guys that make me wrong. So first one I'm going to talk about is Jerrion Ealy. They have him listed as running back / wide receiver. That's because he's more of a pass catcher. You're not going to see him banging down the middle or anything like that. He's kind of a little dude, but definitely a threat out of the backfield, and you're going to see that. And honestly, man, he could make the roster as the 6th wide receiver, and you could see Darius Fountain get cut or go to the practice squad and Jerrion Ealy make the roster. So that's pretty cool out of a undrafted free agent. We had a really good undrafted free agent class. So watch Jerrion Ealy when you go up to St. Joe and check him out and let me know what you think, and we'll be keeping an eye on him in preseason too. Cornell Powell is going to make the practice squad. I don't think this is a cause for an alarm. He was a 7th round pick last year. This is kind of a Byron Pringle type dude that I think is going to sit on the practice squad and then will probably make the roster maybe next year. So, and then you can put up to 6 veterans on your practice squad. One of those guys is going to be Josh Gordon. I just don't think he has much left in the tank, but I think Andy Reid likes having him around. I think he's a little bit of a person project for Andy Reid. I think Andy Reid likes the guy. I think he wants him to do well in life. And sometimes as coaches, man, sometimes we make decisions that are less about football and more about people. And even at the pro level, when we say it's all a business and all that, yeah, sure, but you know, I think you can justify throwing a guy like Josh Gordon on the practice squad for the year and getting him out there on the scout team and kind of keeping him on the straight and narrow and bettering him as a man. And ultimately, man, if you think Andy Reid doesn't do that kind of stuff, I guarantee you he does, man. I guarantee you he has these guys on his mind and what he can do to help them in their life. And ultimately, keeping Josh Gordon around on the practice squad would be a cheap deal, and you would get value out of it on just having him on the scout team And if somebody gets hurt, man, bring him up. He's been in the system for a year now. He should know the system, and, you know, we could see him. He could even make the roster. Matt Bushman, tight end, he's going to make the practice squad. I know a lot of guys think he could even make the roster. Ryan over at RGR thinks he could make the roster. I'm not quite as high as Ryan is on Matt Bushman, but I think he's definitely going to make the practice squad. And then I have next on the practice squad a guy that I can never pronounce his name. Tackle Prince Wanago. I didn't say that right. I'm not even going to attempt it again, but you guys know who I'm talking about. He's been around for a year or two. He'll make the practice squad. Surprise, surprise. Here is our first surprise on the practice squad. Dustin Crum makes the practice squad. Shane Buechele does not. Darrell Williams will make this practice squad and probably get elevated once or twice throughout the year just for injuries and stuff like that. Darius Harris is going to make the practice squad. Here's a guy that could make the practice squad in place of Elijah Lee, our K-State guy, Jack Cochran. He could make the roster, so keep an eye out on him, especially at training camp, see how he's doing. Cortez Broughton, he was on the practice squad last year. I think he'll make it again. Here's another interesting name that a lot of people are talking about. I think this is a guy that we're specifically going to stash for like 2 years. And step one is stashing him this year. I don't think he's going to make the practice squad because he's a fantastic player. I think he's going to make the practice squad out of sheer potential and the fact that we know it's going to take time to develop this guy. And it's Kehinde Ojeni Hassan, I believe is how you say it. And he's the dude from Africa. He's 6'7", like 220 pounds. He's a basketball player. He wanted to be a wide receiver, wanted to be a tight end. Neither one of those positions fit for him when the coaching staff saw him. They moved him over to D-end. They're going to ask him to gain weight, which is why I think they're going to put him on the practice squad and do right by him and say, hey, you've got to put 40 pounds on in the next 2 years. So if you put 40 pounds on over the next 2 years in the weight room with a good nutritionist, you can see this guy develop into a situational pass rusher. I don't know anything else about him. I've seen very little. I actually have seen some videos of him running routes and stuff. He's kind of a lanky, I don't know, man. He's a dude that hasn't played a lot of football, but he has an athletic ability, so I think that's why I'll stick. Next guy is controversial. This dude could absolutely 100% make the 53-man roster. I just haven't heard anything. And he's a guy I'm going to be watching when it comes to training camp and it comes to all that. Definitely going to be keeping an eye on him. Malik Herring. He made the practice squad last year. We picked him up as an undrafted free agent because of an injury. He would have got drafted. He's definitely got the talent to be drafted. Just wasn't in the cards for an injury reason. He could make the 53. He could be a fifth defensive end that we carry. So keep an eye on that. And that's another reason, too, guys, that, hey, if the coaching staff and Veach are seeing Malik Herring and they're seeing Joshua Kando develop, that may be a reason why we didn't sign Ingram and Clowney. I'm hoping that's the reason. Najee Johnson, a draft pick this year. I think he'll make the practice squad. I don't think he has any chance to make the roster, personally. He's a project. If he does make the roster, it'll be special teams. Jalen Watson, I think, again, I know I said this about almost every guy on this list, but Jalen Watson right there on the bubble and could knock somebody off like DeAndre Baker. If Jalen Watson knocks DeAndre Baker off the roster, that's a good sign because Jalen Watson's got a lot of size and a lot of things to be excited about. Next is Zane Anderson. He's an Andy Reid guy. He's a BYU guy. Everybody knows that. And, of course, he reminds us of Dirty Dan. Not just because he's white. He actually plays that way, too. But not Dirty Dan from last year that had no speed and athleticism left and that, for some reason, Spags continually put in bad positions. DiCaprio Boodle, I think, will make he's going to be my last guy from the practice squad. I live up here in Nebraska. I'm not a Nebraska fan, but I am around the program a lot. I get to go over there sometimes to watch spring practice and stuff like that because I'm a high school football coach. There's a lot of Nebraska fans that are rooting for DiCaprio Boodle to make our roster. I don't think he can make the roster, but I think he will probably make the practice squad. And that leaves a name off that I think was a big fan favorite last year during training camp, and people were thinking, hey, this guy's going to make the roster and could possibly have a future in the league. And maybe he still does, but it's not going to be with us. I think he's going to find a new home. Devin Key doesn't make the roster. Also, Austin Edwards doesn't make the roster. So if you're keeping track there at home, Shane Buechele, Devin Key, Austin Edwards, none of them made the cut. And Lucas Niang is on the PUP. So if you were missing that name when I was going through the offensive line, you're like, what the hell, Joe? Why didn't you have Lucas Niang? He's going to start the roster. He's going to start the year on the PUP. And will eventually make that 53-man roster and kick somebody else off. He's just badly hurt. And he's going to come back to the fight of a lifetime for that right tackle position. So keep an eye on that. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Love to hear from you guys. I want to have conversations. So early on here, obviously this is the first episode of the show. I can guarantee and promise you I'll answer every comment because I'll probably only get 40 or 50 views on this first video anyway. But if you comment, I'm going to respond. We can have a conversation. Let me know what you want to see for the next video. Until then, I'll talk to you later.
Make the man, but that poison's gonna chew you from the inside out. So right now, say it with your chest now, say it with your chest now.